This is Katrin with Disability Rights New York. Welcome to our podcast, Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned, for a featured episode of The Director's Chair. These episodes feature our Executive Director, Tim Clune, who invites special guests to discuss important topics in our united work for disability rights and advocacy within our community. Today, we welcome our guest, María Alvarez, the Executive Director of New York StateWide Senior Action Council. María and Tim will talk about the work of New York StateWide Senior Action Council and the advocacy both organizations provide. María and Tim, thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to talk about our common issues.
María, it's great to see you, and thanks for coming on our show today.
María, let's get started with you. Will you tell us about the New York Statewide Senior Action Council? When did it start, and what are your goals?
Yes. New York Statewide Senior Action Council is a nonprofit, a private nonprofit organization that has been in the community for 49 years. Next year will be our 50th anniversary, and we're very excited about that. But it was founded in 1972 with the War on Poverty funds back in the 70s when the government was seeing that community members needed, especially seniors, needed more support to have aging properly in the community. And so a group of advocates, of consumer advocates around the state formed a group, which was New York Statewide Senior Action Council. I'm going to call it statewide from here out because it's quite a mouthful. But it basically, what it does is it advocates for aging in the community, for economic security, and for not only people to survive but to thrive. And it's not just for we don't only advocate on behalf of senior citizens. We advocate on behalf of the entire community because a community is exactly that. It's people of all ages and all walks of life. So we just want to make sure that there's a better quality of life in New York State.
And I think that as we're looking at both organizations, we've been in the advocacy business for lots of decades now. And María, as you talked about when you started, Tim, let's talk about how long DRNY has been doing this and what the years have brought in terms of both wins and losses for both of the communities that we serve and the work that still needs to be done. Tim, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. Our office came into existence. We opened our doors in 1989. So you were a teenager back then, María, with StateWide. And it was as a result of Geraldo Rivera's expose of the Willowbrook catastrophe on Staten Island, New York. And that was in the 1970s. And as a result of that, Congress had created the protection and advocacy system. So if we fast forward to 1989, our office came into existence to provide protection and advocacy services for a particular part of the state. So it was free legal and advocacy services to people with disabilities. In 2013, we became the statewide protection and advocacy system as well as the client assistance program, meaning that we implement 9 federal programs covering a broad range of issues for people with all types of disabilities. So from 2013 to now, our staff had grown from a small office of 7 to about 61 right now, with 3 physical locations across the state, one in Albany, one in Brooklyn, and one in Rochester.
And María, we just talked about communities, and Tim, as you just brought up, we also have a large community that we advocate for. Let's talk about some of the recent news in terms of wins that we've had. Maria, I know that you've had a lot of work that is being done specifically, as you said, in the community for all people, not just seniors. Let's talk about some of the work that you're doing currently and how that's affecting your community.
Well, one of the things that just recently, I think last week, there was just a public hearing in the New York State Senate with the Senate Aging Committee, Health Committee, and Labor Committee on the workforce shortage in nursing homes and home care. That right there is an enormous concern, I think, for not only for seniors, not only for the people with disabilities, but also for the community in general. The fact is that the workforce shortage is occurring because people do not want to work in home care, yet the need for that type of service is only growing. Home care and nursing home care is the fastest growing segment of the healthcare population today, and it doesn't show any signs of abating because the senior population is growing, and we're a graying state, really. In this nation, 5,000 people turn 65 and over every single day. So these needs are going to be are not going away. Now the problem is that people who are working as home attendants, domestic workers, or nursing home care workers are not earning enough money. Many times they're not given enough hours to collect benefits, to qualify for benefits. Many times the work is very hard, inarguably, and they're not given the proper environment to thrive. And so no wonder why, right? People, there aren't enough people who are interested in this job. So what we're trying to do is number one, see how we can improve the situation so that more people will be able to join that workforce. But also it's in the interest of ensuring that our loved ones are well cared for in the future and for many years to come. But one nuance, and something I pointed out in the public hearing, is that this workforce is mostly, so the workforce is mostly women, minorities, right? People with, on the lower income side. But as we look at who is going to be aging, it's going to be those same people, right? So we have to make sure that when the people retire, especially people who are new, who are working in these fields retire, that they are able to be cared for with this, as well as they're able to care for people now. Right now, after COVID, right, or we're in COVID, but people are starting to get back to work. We're fielding calls on our helpline from a lot of people who are saying, I cannot get back to work because I've been caring for my loved one, and now I can't get a home attendant to come and take care of my mother or, my aunt or whoever it may be. And so, and those, who do you think those are? Mostly women, many of them minority, and many of them, if they have to go back out into the community, they probably are on the modest, make modest incomes. So they are then putting in jeopardy their own retirement because they're not paying into a system that they can't access because they're not working, right? So this is a vicious cycle, and I hope I'm explaining this clearly. But it's a vicious cycle, and one that we really need to break, and to make sure that the future of seniors and people with disabilities is well appointed.
You touch on things, and the work that you do is so parallel with a lot of the things that we do. Our mandate is to investigate abuse and neglect of people with disabilities, but also provide direct representation to them. And part of that is choice, that people should have the choice of where they live. And we have been fighting for decades to allow people to live in the community that they want to live in. And oftentimes the state, who is a big player in all of this, will, instead of seeking community and building community resources, rely on the antiquated congregate care setting that showed how horrible it is during this pandemic. I mean, it was a disaster waiting to happen, and you know what? The disaster happened. If there are lessons to be learned from this, we need to move away from the congregate care system and do what we can to let people age in their community, in their homes. One, it is ultimately cheaper for the state, but it is, putting aside the money, just the quality of life that people could have would be increased exponentially. So when you talk about aging in the community, it is such a great synthesis of the things that you do as well as the stuff that we do. And likewise, we testified before 2 Senate committees regarding the impact of COVID, the problems of congregate care, especially in the intellectual developmental community, right, in those group homes, as well as in nursing homes. So this is an opportunity to get away from the old model. And we have been pushing the state to get away from that for decades.
So you both have brought up a topic that is affecting both communities and has been since the inception of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as you both have said, we're certainly not out of it yet. There are circumstances that are affecting people, whether coming back to work or whether it's people who are in need of services from whether it's a nursing home or finding placement or services right now. And the work shortage is certainly part of that, Maria, as you talked about. But when we started this, there were issues that were not addressed for our communities from the beginning. So as we look at emergency preparedness, as we look at how we may end up in this situation again, in the near future or in the distant future, what could have been done differently? What needs to happen to engage these communities from the very beginning to ensure that they're cared for, because certainly that was not the case in March of 2020.
Where to begin?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so I really feel that what we saw in our front, we run 3 helplines. One is the Patients' Rights Helpline, one is the Managed Care Consumer Assistance Program, and the other is our Senior Medicare Patrol Program, which deals with healthcare fraud. So all of those helplines give us a great opportunity to hear what is going on in the front lines. Front lines meaning our members. And not only that, one thing I do want to point out about statewide as well that makes us unique is that we are completely governed and directed by consumers, meaning that our board of directors, our chapters throughout the state, they're all run by consumers, that are, 50 and older. Anybody could be a member of statewide, but to be in those management and director positions, you have to be, receiving the services, because who better to know how things are affecting you than the people that are the recipients of those services and affected by the policies. But getting back to your question, Katrine, Number one, what I really feel is just the basic of what has happened here is that there is no consumer input. Over the years, I mean, there have been New York State has been notorious for its good healthcare system. When you compare it to other states across the nation. However, little by little, the systems have been sort of taking out that consumer input, public opinion. And many times decisions are made without our opinions and our input. And who better, like I said, who better to tell people about how this is affecting than us? And so many other interests take over what those final decisions are. So, for example, the first thing obviously was the vaccine distribution. It was atrocious in New York State, the way it was handled. I mean, I have to tell you, there was so much to be desired. Given that senior citizens and people with disabilities were the people initially and still the people with the highest vulnerability to this pandemic, the way that they encouraged us to access vaccines was completely antithetical to how the senior community works and the disability community works. To tell somebody, go to the website. Every time I hear somebody tell us, a group of seniors, go to the website, for us that, and granted, there are people at all different ages and capacities. But I have to tell you that even if you can access things on a website or on a computer, maybe you don't want to. Maybe you're not you're not used to that because people are used to going to their doctor, having their community health care. And so when they were told that they needed to go to call a telephone, I would get calls on my helpline saying the phones are not working. They crashed the system, basically trying to get the vaccine. And so there was a big miscommunication by media and other informational sources saying that seniors didn't want to get vaccinated. That was simply not true in our experience. They were fighting to get it because they want to be in the community. They want to see their grandchildren. They want to be able to do the things. And realizing that if they were not able to get vaccinated, they were going to become socially isolated, which is what happened to a lot of them. Another thing that happened was, again, getting back to the workforce. Sometimes at the beginning of the pandemic, home care workers were not, home care agencies were not giving the home care workers proper PPE, personal equipment. They did not want to give extra hours for seniors who might have needed it because maybe they had 2 or 3 home attendants and some of them were not, quit or were not able to make it. Sometimes the clients were feeling nervous about letting somebody into their home that was out in the community that they didn't know. So sometimes they wanted to hire their sister or their relative or their friend that they knew and who's maybe in their bubble. And the home care worker. We had to really, really advocate on behalf of those clients because we needed to make sure that they were going to be right and that they were going to receive the proper care, even in a pandemic. I have to tell you that the pandemic has, and these are not new issues. And that's the whole thing. These are not new issues. These are things we have been talking about and advocating for over many, many years. And the pandemic just brought it out into the open for everybody else to see. But I really feel that those are just 2 of the big issues that we confronted in this. I could go on forever, but I would like to hear Tim's perspective.
I can echo everything that you said, Maria. What we have seen over the decades and in my career is that people with disabilities are often the first to be impacted and the last to be considered when it comes to public emergencies, emergency planning, this pandemic for sure, and a lot of the issues that you have just talked about certainly affected and were part of the communities that we deal with. Let me give you just an example. And when you talk about the internet, right, there is a component of not considering everybody when it comes to the dissemination of information. So for instance, the governor back in March and April of 2020 was holding these daily press conferences and providing valuable information to the community about what you should do, what you should know, and everything else. However, on screen, on TV, because these were live press conferences, he did not have an ASL, an American Sign Language interpreter. We had contacted the governor's office and said, hey, we see that you have an interpreter on your web page, which falls in line with what you were talking about, but you don't have it on screen. And the response was, well, people can just go to the web page. Well, the truth is not everybody, first of all, not everybody has internet. So let's just start there. Not everybody has a computer. And there are some people who get their news the old-fashioned way. They watch it on TV. And that is an audience that needs to be included in these really, really important press conferences. We had to sue the governor's office because they refused to do this. And, in a heartbeat, the judge said, you got to do this and do it by tomorrow, whatever the time frame was. So that has been ongoing. We have seen a few, there have been some instances where an ASL interpreter was not on screen live. And I think that we're not letting this go. And it is, there's an arrogance that comes with the disenfranchisement of the communities that we represent and that we fight. And I've been with this organization since 1990, and I always joke that my job is to put us out of business. That's never going to happen. The things that we are dealing with today are things that we dealt with in the 90s, in the 2000s, right? We can now say that in the 2000s and the 2010s.
20s.
Right. And now we're dealing with it in the 20s. We need to do better. And we need to educate the next generation of advocates to ensure that these things do not go away, and that the advent of the internet is great, but what we have recognized is not every community has access to broadband, high-speed internet. Another thing that should be happening, it should be in every community. We can do it. There just isn't a will yet to do it, but we're going to keep the pressure on.
Yes. So I just wanted to say something about that, because we do recognize that we have a Central New York Health Task Force in 8 counties in Central New York. And it was supposed to be an organizing, activity, but then we started it as COVID started. So we could not meet in the community. And what we ended up doing was having a lot of Zoom meetings, just like we're having here. But what came out when we were exploring what the barriers are, because it's to explore what the barriers are to obtaining healthcare, whether you have health insurance or not, but what are the barriers in Central New York? Broadband, among other things, but broadband was a huge issue, especially during the pandemic, when all of a sudden they're saying, you have to have you have to go get your services from telehealth, right? And so when you talk about that, how people do not have broadband or don't have a computer or don't have, they might have some type of Wi-Fi, but it's not appropriate for a telehealth service. So what we have done now is we have a telehealth project where we got together with the 211 program and us and the library system in central New York. And we have about right now 50 libraries, but 9 community organizations, and some of them are independent living centers, where what we're doing is outfitting them with the equipment that then people can come in and conduct their telehealth services either in the library or in the parking lot, depending, everybody's at a different stage of opening. But yeah, so that they don't have to think that they, number one, either don't get anything at all, right? And that they miss their appointment or have to travel 4 hours to go to a more populated county, but that they can have telehealth in, relatively closer to them so that they can, and it's been pretty successful so far. We just started it, but there's tremendous promise in it.
That is great. The points that you make are so important. Technology is wonderful, but when it's not available to everyone, it is of little right, consolation to the person who doesn't have it. And to just piggyback on what you said, 911, right? Crucial to have across the state, but there is not text to 911 services available in every community. Go figure it. And wait for it. New York City is one of them. And we have a lawsuit against New York City on this. My understanding is Wyoming County has text to 911 services and New York City cannot get this together. This should not, for obvious reasons, text to 911 is critical. And that is not happening. So it affects people with disabilities and people without disabilities, because there can be circumstances that even someone who might otherwise be able to verbally speak with a 911 operator might not be in a position to do it. So it is just one more example of lack of attention to our communities.
Speaking of another initiative, we're lucky to be co-plaintiffs with the Center for Independence and Disability Rights in New York on suing the MTA because they refuse to have accessible subway stations. And, of course, people think about the people who are with disabilities, but seniors have the same problem. How many times, we hold chapter meetings every month when we're able to meet in the community. How many times have I heard from my members who say, I can't make it to the meeting? And these are leaders who need to get the information so that they could get it back to their communities. But I can't make it to the meeting because, the escalator was out, the elevator was out. My area doesn't have that. The bus broke down, and all of those things. And the problem is that all of these systems are being cut. So, for example, bus routes in New York City are being rerouted so to exclude a lot of the outer areas and the outer boroughs, which means that people who live in those areas, especially if they're seniors or people with disabilities, are going to find it a lot more difficult for themselves to get out and come get resources in such a rich area like New York City. So, and the other thing I would be remiss if I did not bring it up is that we can take all of these problems that we are talking about, and then whether you're a senior, whether you're a person with disability or neither one of those, but if you do not speak English as a first language, that's another layer of issues. that comes on, and the reality is that there was so much misinformation during COVID. Not everybody accesses services through, the Department for the Aging or things like that. But so they were afraid to get a meal from, that were being given out free, because they thought they might get arrested by immigration. They might lose their chance at getting a green card, all of these things, this misinformation. So the role that organizations like ours play, we're trusted organizations in these communities that do not access services from the mainstream. We're the trusted organizations that can dispel all of those rumors and make sure that they are getting what they qualify for and what they need.
Thank you for doing that, Maria. I mean, it is incredibly important, and these people were in dire straits to begin with and would have been in just catastrophic situations. So thank you.
Well, thank you both for all of the information that you shared with us today. Obviously, access is a big issue that both organizations are working on. And I'm sure that we will invite you back again, Maria. There's so much more to talk to. I think probably we could talk for several hours and still not cover everything.
Time flew by. I think we're just getting started here. We should continue.
I know. And I think we'll have to be topic specific so we can have just an hour with you speaking about just one topic, because we need them all. But truly, thank you both so much for being here today. These are important conversations for the community and for our audience, and certainly for our audience members. If you have any questions about anything you've heard today, certainly feel free to reach out to both organizations, and we will be happy to help you with that. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I really enjoyed my time, and I hope it's not the last time that we do something like this.
This was awesome, Maria. Thank you very much. We'll do this again.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, we have to talk about you coming to our stations now.
Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned has been brought to you by Disability Rights New York, your source for disability rights and advocacy. If you enjoyed our program, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this post. If there is a subject you would like us to discuss, please email podcast@drny.org or comment below. Tune in next Wednesday, where we'll bring you more information on disability rights in the state of New York. The closed captioned and ASL version of this podcast is available on our YouTube channel. To listen to more Empire State of Rights closed captioned, follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.